Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and in today's video we have a bunch of Season 4 news, including dungeon tuning, big dungeon tuning, but I want to start off with kind of more meta level things about Season 4 that have been discovered or are now being speculated about. So obviously the PTR has just gone up for Season 4, and one thing that's in there is the Awakened, which is the new word for Faded. It looks like it is going to be on a rotation. Which of the three raids is awakened any given week in much the same way as Shadowlands Season 4. This is a decision that was, I think, speculated would maybe be re-examined this time around, because I think there are a lot of pretty valid criticisms of the rotating model where a lot of raid guilds would, kind of relearn some of the fights of one raid, and particularly if you don't clear the whole thing in 1 week and the next week it's just not there anymore, you have to relearn a new raid, and by the time you get back to any given raid, a lot of that kind of muscle memory and stuff is gone. So that is what they're choosing to do with it again this time around. And yeah, the other information we have is the Antique Bronze Bullion, which is the new dinar of some kind. So you remember in Shadowlands you could get 3 dinars and you could use them to purchase any trinkets, any weapons with special effects, anything like that, except for the legendary Sylvanas bow. You could purchase them with dinars and you could upgrade them all the way up to fully mythic level from doing the mythic raids during the Faded season. Now this time around, bullions look like they're going to function a little bit differently. The vendor offers a bunch of different stuff for 2 bullion each. A bunch of different items there. And there's a vendor that sells cosmetics for a bunch of different weapons for 1 bullion each, or Jigglesworth Senior, which was the mount from last Faded, from Shadowlands Faded, for 3 bullion. So we can't be 100% sure of this. We don't actually know what the acquisition model is for bullion, but my guess is that you can earn probably an infinite amount over the, or not an infinite, right? But you can, there's not like a cap. There may be a weekly cap or something like that. But my guess is that you can probably be getting maybe 1 of these per week for the whole season, something like that. Would be the acquisition pace that I would guess based off of these prices. And you can also notably buy all the very rares, all of the, the Aranog ring, anything like that that you might feel the need to farm from the raid. If you don't get it, you can pick it up with these bullions, which is nice. They also, the legendaries, it's confirmed that legendaries will drop as usual from raids, and if they drop in Season 4 from an Awakened raid, they'll be high level when they drop for you. But players who have previously obtained them can purchase a Scale of Awakening, which is another thing that costs 2 bullion, to upgrade their items all the way up to Season 4 eye level, which is 502, and then can be upgraded with crests and flight stones. So interesting model there, because presumably that's going to be 502 all the way up to 539, and it's going to be a big upgrade track for those weapons. But that is, yeah, cool. Okay, let's get into the dungeon tuning. So first of all, finally, we have hard confirmation that Season 4 is going to be the 8 Dragonflight dungeons from Season 1 and 2. So not Dawn of the Infinite, but all of the other Dragonflight dungeons. And all of the changes coming through for the difficulty of Heroic difficulty, Mythic difficulty. Every Mythic Plus level is all changing. I have a video from a couple weeks ago when they first announced this. But basically, every key is now 10 levels harder than it was before. So a 5 is equivalent to what a 15 used to be. And other than that, it's mostly just a shift around of the numbers, so nothing big changing aside from where affixes kick in. Affixes will kick in at a higher numeric difficulty, and Mythic 0 is a much higher difficulty, which actually means Mythic 0 will reward, I think, Veteran track from the dungeons and Champion track from the vault, which is pretty good. That's some pretty good items. If you're not a fan of timed content, you can still get some pretty good stuff out of that. Okay. We also have Crest and Flightstone rewards changing as well to match that. But let's get into the actual dungeon changes. So, Halls of Infusion. Dungeon checkpoint added after defeating Gulping Goliath. Great. Halls of Infusion launched with this idea of like, oh, at the start you can either clear to the left and get a cheat death if you've got an engineer, or you can clear to the right and open up a passageway that you can then use as an extra run back tool, right? That you can run back, you can have a better run back. And that was just a horrifyingly bad decision for M+. It made Halls of Infusion just have this, like, 6-minute run back if you wiped at certain points, which, you know, not only is that not fun, but I believe it overly punished wiping. Wiping is already something that it's very bad to do that in M+, right? Like, the odds of being able to recover from a wipe, depending on the key level, depending on where you wipe, is already very low. It doesn't need to be penalized further. Adding a checkpoint after Gulping Goliath is a really good change. This is going to make Halls of Infusion a lot less bad. Yeah, hopefully this is something that they can take a lesson from and not give us a whole season without this of a dungeon ever in future. Normalize the spawn rate of Crashing Tsunami during the Gauntlet. Cool. The Containment Beams damage has been reduced by 42%. These were the orbs at the start of the dungeon, and there are packs that are just like 3 orbs that were extremely difficult to deal with because Containment Beam was just, they would just spam cast them on you. And yeah, this is a great nerf. This is a great thing to target in the dungeon for that. The Gale Singers have had Wind Buffet removed, Thunderstorm removed, and they now use Thunderstrike, which is a 7-yard AoE around, I guess, the tank. So, nice. That's good. Wind Buffet was a pretty weird ability there. And Rumbling Earth's rim visual will no longer clip into terrain from the Earthshaker, so it'll be easier to see, because you do often fight them in that passageway that does have some twists and turns and some changes in elevation, so good change there. Watcher Iridius, Titanic Fist now has a visual during its cast. Great. That was a pretty poorly telegraphed ability. So whatever visual they've added to that can only make it better. Power Overload now has a rim visual glowing around afflicted player, and Power Field now gradually grows to full size. That's great as well. The meta for dealing with this back in Season 2 was Massive Spell and then, like, Gateway or big travel abilities to get out of the massive fields as quickly as you could. So having them gradually grow now means that the difference between having a Massive Spell or a Revival and not having one, it has gotten a lot less egregious, which was... one of the big problems with Halls of Infusion in particular was the power of Massive Spell. They have nerfed Massive Spell's cooldown as well since that season, but this is still going to be great. Kajin the Unyielding added rim visuals on ice boulders that will trigger Avalanche. Great. Primal Tsunami, Castaway now occurs at 50% health, was 100% energy. Phenomenal change. This fight was really rough because... if you were doing it on a high key, it would be splitting like 4 times over the course of the fight, and it was just a 7-minute slog as you were running back and doing that main phase over and over again. Making it occur on a health transition instead of an energy transition is much healthier. That fight is going to be a lot less bad. So overall, fantastic changes to Halls of Infusion. A lot of stuff, like the dungeon checkpoint, is something I didn't think they would be willing to do because of the way they designed the dungeon with the checkpoint, kind of with a natural, like, way of earning a faster path through the dungeon, but I'm really glad they've done this. This is going to make this dungeon, like, when I was thinking about Season 4, I was like, Halls of Infusion and Uldaman are 2 dungeons I'm just really not interested in doing again, but these changes give me a great deal of hope that Halls of Infusion will be a better experience than it was last time. Azure Vault, timer's gone up by 1 minute. Crystal Fury, Piercing Shards now have a precast, and their impact area has been reduced. So that's the frontal from the rock things. A large part of Azure Vault's strategy back in Season 1 was lining these or stunning them, doing a bunch of stuff to make sure that your tank wouldn't get murdered by Piercing Shard. I suspect that would be a little bit less of a big deal now with how much more powerful tanks are, although Prot Warriors would probably still be interested in doing that. But yeah, adding a precast visual, giving it less area, great change. Conjured Lashers, Mystic Vapors will now be cast less frequently. That's just the first pull of the dungeon where you grab a bunch of Lashers and then you AoE CC them until they die, or they cast Mystic Vapors and then you die. That was kind of how that pull would go. Arcane Tender's Erratic Growth cast time has been increased by a second to 3.5 seconds. Cool. Heavy Tome will be cast less frequently on Unstable Curator. Cool. Draconiid Breaker. Shoulder Slam's knockback has been removed. This is when the breaker would just charge somebody in your party. Now it inflicts physical damage and increases physical damage taken by 10%, and it will be cast less frequently. Now I'm a little bit skeptical of this change because these mobs are already really nasty to fight. Casting Shoulder Slam less frequently, but if it's going to do a bunch of physical damage and increase physical damage taken, these mobs might still be turbo banned to be pulling. And they might be especially turbo banned to fight like 2 at the same time, which, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, I understand kind of putting the brakes on how much you can do at once in that area, but I think doing it through the breakers is pretty bad because that was already what you were limited by. So I'd rather see them instead target mobs like the frogs or something with something to try and incentivize you to not pull the whole area all at once rather than the breakers, because we have found ways to avoid pulling breakers before, and I think that's probably what we're going to do again. But we'll have to see how this actually shakes out. This could be making them less lethal rather than more. Encounters Laymore Erupting Fissures now follow current target players. Azure Blade reduces the frequency of periodic damage from overwhelming energy. It's every 2.5 seconds, was every 2 seconds, so the intermission is going to tick less often. Umbral Skull, Oppressive Miasma removed in Mythic difficulty. I assume that means in Mythic Plus as well, which is the slow that ramps on you as you move. Crystallize now pulses arcane damage when the crystal is shielded, so you want to break the shielded crystal as soon as you can. And Crackling Vortex now has a larger movement radius. Cool. I think this is good. I think this boss was really... Oppressive Miasma was pretty yucky. This is like the one fight in the game you were happy to proc Thundering on, because Thundering made you immune to slows for as long as it was on you. And yeah, I think this makes sense. I think this ability was not fully cooked. Brackenhide. Rotbow Stalkers have been renamed Rotbow Rangers. Shoot now has a recast of 6 seconds, so they won't spam them at you. And that also probably means that they will run at your tank, rather than, they'll shoot, and then for 6 seconds they won't have shoot available, and they should run at your tank then, which will make it a lot easier to group them. Diseased Meat has been renamed to Rotten Meat and is now a Poison Dispel. Brackenhide Shapers have had Summon Lashers and Touch of Decay removed. Stink Breath has had its AoE reduced by a yard. It now locks its facing after targeting a player and has a visual while casting on Stink Breath as well, which is huge. Stink Breath used to just be, that used to be heat-seeking, impossible to dodge, and now it'll be possible to bait it and then dodge it, which will mean that Stink Breath won't be a mob that you can't pull anymore, because you couldn't pull this thing in a key above a 20 because it would just kill anybody it Stink Breathed on, or it would Stink Breath your tank, and then your tank would be disoriented, and then it would go kill somebody else in your group. So great change there. Gut Stabber's Withering Poison has been removed. Brackenhide War Scourge's Bloody Bite has been removed. Claw Fighter's Bloody Bite's been removed. And Decay Speaker's Rot Chaining Totem's been removed. So this is an interesting set of changes here. The Stalker changes in particular, I guess the Ranger changes now, are pretty cool as well, because this might make a left side path in Brackenhide an option. The Rangers were a big part of the reason why that side was not ever done. But casting shoots, this is 75% less shoots being cast. That's a big deal. That might make this side a viable strategy. I'm a little bit skeptical still, because the top left versus top right at the end, top left feels way easier to me than top right after you've cleared all the bosses except for the last one. That gauntlet over on the right side still feels pretty bad. So I think I don't think this will necessarily change the pathing you do in there, but it's good for them to try. Anytime there's a dungeon that has ostensibly 2 paths in it, and 99% of people are doing one over the other, it's good to try and try and nerf some of the difficulty of whichever side people aren't doing. Okay, Hackclaw's Warband. The haste bonus has been nerfed on Predatory Instincts, which I believe is haste based on missing health across the party. Mark for Butchery's damage frequency has been increased to 1 second, so it's going to do half the damage. Gash Frenzy's damage has been nerfed, and its duration has also been reduced. It's 15 seconds, was 45. I think this was a dot that you healed off by topping the person. I don't 100% remember that, though. But either way, this was a very nasty boss. It's good to see some nerfs landing on this one in particular, because it was, when you're doing a tyrannical Brackenhide, if you could beat Hackclaw's Warband, you could beat the whole dungeon, and you would often do the dungeon, wipe the Hackclaw's Warband, and go somewhere else, and that was kind of an unfortunate pattern in Brackenhide. Algathar. Arcane Rain has been removed from the Scepters. Spectral Invoker's Arcane Missiles damage has been reduced as well, so big pulls at the end, maybe got a little bit more on the menu here. Croth is going to cast fewer Firestorms, and the initial and periodic damage of Savage Peck have been reduced, which is going to be big for a lot of tanks, although tanks are much more powerful than we were in Season 1, but still, Savage Peck in particular is a type of damage that a lot of tanks struggle with. There are tanks like Blood Decay that do not care about Savage Pack. They're happy with it. They literally completely unbothered by a Savage Pack. But there are some tanks like Brewmaster, like Prot Warrior, that Savage Pack is a big threat to, and particularly if the key level started going way high up this season, I think that if this hadn't been nerfed, there would have been a really tough time to be playing those, especially because Presevoker used to be able to do this trick to clear like 3 out of every 6 Savage Packs with, storing Cauterizing Flame in Echoes, and, Presevoker, hopefully it returns to being a viable Mythic Plus healer, but right now it's not, so that would have made that even nastier if that stays true. Hopefully that changes. I would love to see Presevoker back. Echo of Dorogosa, Unleash Energy added as the new mythic mechanic. Okay. I guess. Don't know what that is, so yeah. We'll have to find out. I'm sure there are people already streaming on PTR right now, but as of right now in this video, I don't know what that is, so cool. Neltharus, each chain can only be used once. Chain now stuns all enemies in it and increases their damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds. So the old meta for Neltharus used to be pull an absolute boatload of mobs, everybody clicks a chain, you kill the whole pack with everybody chaining the pack. Now the chain can only be used once, and now that I believe the chain doesn't actually do upfront damage anymore from the data mining, and it just increases their damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds. This is still very powerful, but it's probably going to do a good job of changing the meta so that instead of pulling the whole dungeon onto one chain, you're kind of, for each chain, you're going to pull a medium to large size of mobs onto that chain, and then take advantage of the stun and damage amp if you can, but it's not going to be... I think this is going to do a good job of making the chains a lot less egregious, which is really good. Neltharus suffered tremendously for the chains existing the way they did for that entire season, so just like Halls of Infusion, the best time to make this change was a year ago, but I'm very glad that they're making it now, and I hope in the future these sorts of changes can be made the first season that these dungeons are out, but it's just good to see. Chargath. Fiery Focus's pulsing damage near Chargath has been removed, and it now channels damage on the current target. So you remember Chargath would run after your tank with a circle around Chargath that would do a bunch of damage if you stood in it. Now there's not going to be a circle, and it's just going to blast your tank instead until you break the Fiery Focus. Great change. That circle was very weird. It was kind of finicky to actually make sure you were out of it versus in it. And, as you were manipulating the chains, sometimes weird stuff would happen. Grounding Chain now persists on defeated player, and it does a small knockback to the player when applied. Great. Chains being lost because somebody would die was really frustrating on Chargath. That was a really frustrating way to wipe. Sarga. Curse of the Dragon Horde now stacks, and its duration has been reduced from 5 minutes to 30 seconds. Great. So if you don't have a Curse to spell, you're not permanently screwed on Sarga. A Curse to spell is still nice, but you can now just make sure you don't refresh your stack, and you'll be fine. And then also the charge treasure has been removed, which is great because that one would kill you. The other ones are all pretty playable, so great changes to Neltharus. All right, let's move on to Nokhud Offensive. The Nokhud Longbow is not going to cast multi-shot anymore, and Rain of Arrows will be cast less frequently. Cool. Hunt Prey's damage bonus has been reduced by 25% on the Beastmaster. Hunt Prey was when it would point at somebody and then the birds would chase that person and do bonus damage. Now they're not going to do as much bonus damage. Good. Nokhud Thunderfist's Storm Shock has been removed, and Primalist Storm Speaker's Storm Bolt has been removed. So overall, slight reductions in some abilities across the trash here. Not much changes to bosses. We just have one during Balakar Khan, which has the frequency of storm winds during the intermission has been reduced to every 10 seconds, was every 6 seconds. I don't actually remember what storm winds was. I wonder if that's a damage tick, because there were a lot of like swirlies during that intermission as well. Yeah, but either way, the intermission is going to be a little bit less hectic during Balakar Khan. But bosses like Primal Tempest, no changes to that one. That was a boss nerfed during its season, but should still be, I guess, if they're not further reducing its danger, which I actually think that boss is going to be a lot less scary, not just because of the nerfs that it received over the course of Season 1, but also because healers are so much more powerful now that, like, relative to a health bar's worth of damage incoming on somebody, they can handle that in a third of the globals that they used to. So I think that boss will actually not be too bad anymore. Ruby Life Pools. The Primal Terra Sentry's Stone Missiles have been removed. And then Kairaka is going to cast Inferno Core. The duration has been increased to 4 seconds from 3, and its periodic damage has been reduced by 25%. which should make that a lot more healable, a lot less likely to just randomly kill somebody. Well, I guess just 1 more second, so maybe it'll still be pretty nasty, especially if the key level starts getting really high. Couple bosses I'm a little bit worried about as the key level gets high. Tira and Maruk from Nokhud actually is another one where I'm a little bit worried that that's just going to get extremely one-shotty extremely quickly. So maybe something that we need to see some further, reduction to the things that one-shot you. And then finally, Uldaman Legacy of Tyr. One change here on the Lost Dwarves of all encounters. Fiery Surge's damage has been reduced by 50%, which I think is the boat swirlies, the fire swirlies from the boat. It's tough because Uldaman is a dungeon that viscerally I don't like doing. I hated it whenever my key turned into Uldaman. That dungeon is just kind of such a long slog. But I'm not sure if I have like suggestions that I can point to for things that would make that better. Maybe there are some mobs like those big robots later in the dungeon with their, earthquake or whatever. The tank damage on those as well. And like the mobs that channel the rock bolts on everybody. Like maybe those abilities are ones that could be toned down a little bit. But I don't know. Mostly Uldaman, it's kind of a length problem for me that dungeon has that I don't know if they have any good way of solving that. And then finally, Dawn of the Infinite. Dawn of the Infinite's hard mode is available for testing with updated tuning and rewards. Hard mode does not have a timer and rewards a hero track item intended to be more challenging than a standard mythic difficulty dungeon. And also that means if you haven't done your death list on the Infinite hard mode or whatever, you can potentially go back and do that and still get the rewards next season. So it should be pretty cool. Yeah, it should be pretty neat indeed. Okay, so that was all the news about the dungeon change and stuff. Although while I was recording this, another post has been created, which actually a couple new posts, which we should take a look at. So one is the Awakened upgrade track. It looks like this track is just going to apply to anything you buy with the bullions, where anything you buy with a bullion is going to just start at 493, upgrade 1 out of 12, and then you can bring it up to 12 out of 12 at 528 or 14 out of 14 at 535 for very rare items from end bosses, which are this list of items, right? Anything that dropped from Fireack, Neltharion, Sarkareth, Razageth, those sorts of bosses that were also very rare. So that is the Awakened upgrade track. I think that the Hero, Myth, Champion tracks will still exist for things that actually drop from the raid. And then also there's a weekly open world quest for Sparks of Awakening, which it looks like it's very similar to Aiding the Accord, where you kind of choose what or maybe you're not choosing at the start. At the start, you're just going to whichever zone is empowered that week, which is probably associated with whichever raid is awakened. And then maybe later in the patch, if they do the same thing they did during Fated Season 4, where they opened up all 3 of the raids, then maybe they'll also open up all 3 of the zones, and you can choose which one you want to do, and you can get your spark. Unclear. It doesn't look like this is a source for the dinars yet, the bullions. Those are still remains to be seen exactly how and how many of these you can acquire in any given week. All right, that's my little roundup of Season 4 stuff for today. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.